Hello, my name is Derek Jones, and my background is as a practicing architect, but I've also had my own visualization business, building visualization, product visualization, and graphic design business as well. So, in my career, I've had to learn how to use a lot of very expensive and very specialized design software. So, these are my top 5 tips on how to go about learning to use design software. So, tip number 1, have a reason. So if you're anything like me, it's really hard just to learn something for the sake of it. It's far better to have a reason. And even if you're learning something general, so for example, you might be learning the new updates for a piece of software. So for example, when the next version of Photoshop comes out, I'll usually sit down and I'll try to work through the new features, the new additions. But even then, even that general learning, there's a reason behind it. It's because I know I'm probably going to use some of those features later on. But what motivates me even more is having something very specific to work on. So for example, a project, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a live project. It might be something you're going to put into your portfolio. Maybe it's a new technique that you're wanting to use. And again, if you want that full pressure experience, then do it on a real project, on something that you are actually working for a client. There's nothing that motivates you better than a deadline and needing to do something. So tip number 2, be selective. You do not need to learn every single function that there is in Photoshop. Photoshop was designed to be used by loads of different designers, from working on high-end photography right through to certain types of graphic design, okay? You don't need to know all of the functions in Photoshop, so sitting through training that teaches you all that is a waste of time. By all means, go through some basic training. That's a really good place to start, like what the interface is, where all the tools are, some of the basic things you can do in Photoshop, or any other package indeed. And then after you've done that, don't spend more than, a couple of days on that. Do a thing called trickle training, which is where you learn a little thing every day, or you set yourself many tasks. So for example, my big tip on this is to learn a keyboard shortcut every single day for the new piece of software that you're thinking about, okay? Because that'll, first of all, get you quicker. Keyboard shortcuts are the fastest way to work an application. And second of all, you'll maybe start to experiment with the different tools, okay? The other trickle thing you can do is to only learn the things that you need when you need them, okay? And that depends on this next tip. So, tip number 3, learn to design. Don't learn to use software, okay? There's a reason you're using software, and it's that reason that's more important than the software itself. So my big tip for this is to stop watching training videos and how-to videos, and actually to start to watch what we call workflow videos. So that's actual practitioners, actual artists, actual graphic designers doing their job using the tools. And that way you're learning a bit about how it is they go about the design process, not just the software. And the other thing is as well, that there are loads of different ways to do the same thing. So watching 4 or 5 different people do the same thing can also be very, very, very instructive. Even something as simple as, I don't know, say selecting images that you're going to present to a client, how you make them all look the same, how you make a decision about them. That's a mini workflow. And then sometimes you will then use software to make those images better, to make them look consistent or whatever it might be. But that's the secondary part, okay? So my big tip for this is to find your own sources of information, and particularly people's workflows that you like to look at. And that leads into the next tip. Tip number 4, have your favorite material. So I have a list of websites. I just keep a little text file with a whole series of links to some basic tutorial sites. So for example, the Autodesk website has some really good how-to videos, and they tend to keep those up to date when they bring a sort of new version of their software out. Same with Adobe for a range of their bits of software. And I'll use those for the kind of basic training that I mentioned in tip 2. But I'll also have a list of my favourite YouTube channels. So I subscribe to a number of different designers on YouTube because, as I mentioned in the last tip, I like looking at workflow. And I'm not necessarily interested sometimes in even the software that they're using. It's how they're maybe going between software, or what they're thinking about, or what their thinking process is. Again, I have a list of people that I really respect in the industry and that I know who give good advice and are also good educators as well, to be quite honest with you. And when you find these sorts of sources, they can be very valuable for your own personal practice. And that kind of leads nicely into the last tip, tip 5. Make use of friends and peers. So share your work with your friends, because if you get your ideas out of your head and you show other people, you get a different perspective on it. It's a way of checking your work in some ways, because that's basically what design is. You do something, you hope that it's there, you check that it is. If it's not, you make it better, and you keep iterating until you get to where you want to go. When you're learning, you can do that with your peers as well. You can compare your work to other people. And this isn't just a competitive thing. It's not just to say, am I better than other people? It's because you will be different to other people. And that's the absolute key to this. No two designers design in precisely the same way. And again, I'll go back to the previous tip on workflow. If you see something that another student has done, ask them how they did that. What was the process they went through? Or even better, if you've both done the same thing, you can compare processes. That can be a really powerful way of learning. And in turn, you can actually start to help one another, and your own expertise will actually become quite valuable. Because as I mentioned before, I have a list of people in the industry that I respect quite highly, and I look at their workflows. I like their videos because they are trying to explain what is valuable about their process and thinking. And over time, your thinking and process is going to be valuable too. So think about contributing that back. Think about creating your own workflow videos as well and give those to other people. Because then you might start to connect at a very specialist level. When I had my visualization business, there weren't too many people around the world who were doing some of the very advanced techniques that we were doing. So you have this kind of unique community that helps each other because they're interested in a very particular thing. So there we go, that's my top 5 tips for how to learn design software. First of all, have a reason. Second of all, be selective about what it is that you train. Third, learn design. Focus on the design, not the software. Fourth, have your favourite sources of learning material. And then finally, make good use of friends and peers.